Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 8, World Chess Championship 2024. We remain level, 3.5 points apiece. Ding Liren, with the white pieces this time around, kicks off with c4. We're seeing quite the variety in this match. In each of Ding's 4 white games, we've seen e4, knight f3, d4, and here we are in Game 8 with c4. This is one of the more strategic starts to a game you will find. The structure for many moves remains undefined. Each side really tries to play in a flexible way out of this English opening, not so quick to show one another's hand and the exact setup they're going to go for. One thing that really sticks out to me with this game are these guys right here. Neither take a step until move 19, which is very late to move one of your center pawns. Very rare for that to happen. In this game, we have bishop b4, noted as the Kramnik-Shirov Counterattack. Some pressure on the knight, hops in the center, and Ding goes for a kingside fianchetto. Now, white is not so quick to initiate this capture. Let us first see how the knight will be challenged before making a commitment. Gukesh's play here is with c6. Very sensible to play with this move, anticipating the bishop on the long diagonal. A b7, c6 construction will tame that piece. It's c6 in this game. No, not knight f6, piece pressure. What is Gukesh's big idea? Well, after knight takes bishop, it's the knight who ends up recapturing. Why? Normal is to take with the queen and keep f6 open for the knight, keep its favorite square open to the knight. The big idea is revealed soon enough in this game. After bishop g2, it is f6, move 7. This set Ding Liren into a think. He spent about 14 minutes on his reply. He ends up castling in this position. Why f6? What's going on with this early f-pawn advance? Well, white has an unopposed dark square bishop. You could view it as black strengthening his control over dark squares, g5, mainly e5. Now that e5 is supported, black is ready to go with an early center push, d5, obtaining an ideal pawn center. How to react to this move? There's a structure I'd like to emphasize here, one that white is really not such a fan of. Instead of the move in the game castles, let's say you want to challenge black's strong pawn. How should black react? Definitely with e4. If in this position black is capturing on d4, you know who looks silly? This guy. What are you doing now? You were supposed to support a pawn, and now that pawn isn't around. Okay, the e-pawn should live in the event of d4, and this construction right here tames the dark square bishop, really, light square bishop biting on a rock. The central structure may be a bit too static for white. Playing with the bishop pair, not so appealing. What would be appealing for white playing with the bishop pair? Well, maybe the dream here would be to have a center that is absent of any pawns and much more opened diagonals for the bishops. All right, something to note here. If white could break a rule for just a move and run in reverse with the d-pawn in order to challenge the invasive e4 pawn, we might be looking at something much different. All right, in this game, no d4, it's castles, pressure on c4, defended, c4 challenged once more, and in this game, we continue with bishop a3 and black castles. These two moves here marking move 10. Ding spent about 30 minutes, Gukesh 4 minutes. This pawn here is poison. So it is castles. What happens if black ends up taking twice on c4? This is what happens. d4. The center gets blasted open. e4, white would have a good reply to that. Knight d2, and there's a problem here and there. This is already considered a decisive advantage for white. Nearby, a knight sinking into d6, that's going to be devastating. Continuation like this is absolutely horrible for black. Completed development, monster bishops, open lines. You cannot take on c4 in this position and give up your strong center pawn. It is castles in this game. c4 now secure directly. a5, very sensible, preparing to next tuck the knight behind the pawn. It interacts well with that pawn, and now the knight has a nice jump on b4. Also, this guy factors into the equation as well. The a file can easily open up after the knight is captured there. Now, we continue on this flexible path, no commitment, still with these center pawns. It is knight to e1, paving the way for f4. Rook e8, out of a pin. Here we go with f4. Very unusual start here. Center under fire by flank pawns. These guys here, uncommitted still. Now, how to react to f4? Do you maintain the tension and carry on with knight to a6? Or do you maybe capture or push? In the game, it's pawn takes pawn. Let's consider some other moves. If you go with knight a6, that's not such a good choice because white can take, and a couple things stick out. One, this rook springs to life, and this rook now looks a bit silly. You would almost want to have this rook right back on the f8 square. So that earlier rook 8 move, rook e8 move, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, because that pawn has made a capture, these two squares are now vulnerable. e5 would become a hole. It'd be immediately targeted with knight f3, maybe knight g5, increased pressure on e5. Not a good idea to allow white to take and pull the f6 pawn away to this e5 square. Another move to consider, what about e4? Well, remember earlier I said when the pawn was on d4, we'd like to break a rule and run in reverse to challenge the pawn? We don't have to break a rule. We can play d4 here to put pressure on this guy. Much different scenario here. We don't have a situation where it is a fixed center. We have a center here that is being broken down. Good news for the side here with the bishop pair. Also note, if black tries to reinforce this e4 pawn, the invasive pawn, with f5, as soon as you touch that f pawn, this guy's eyes open up really wide. e5 becomes a hole, and you could be sure the bishop will relocate on the main diagonal pointing at e5 and then some. It would have a direct shot at the heart of black's kingside structure. Okay, in this game, the reaction to f4, e takes f4, rook takes f4, challenging this rook right away with knight g6. There is rook to d4, placing the pawn in a pin. Black, in a way, doesn't want to see that. He ends up capturing on c4 first, and only then knight g6. You can't go here now. But you can go to e4, now that there isn't a d pawn around. Follow-up from here is knight to a6. Now, if you look at some forceful moves here for black, one of the top lines in the computer's eyes is to go with f5, and then even f4. This is probably a line to stay away from as black. Reason being, you don't have that construction anymore to limit this guy. Rook g3. There's already some pressure on the dark squares. Best here is considered knight to h6, but just to highlight variation like this where you swipe a fianchettoed bishop, normally a very good thing. This is considered a good position for white, very good position. Coordination soon going to happen on that dark square. So you'll want to be careful, in short. Gukesh, not so quick to budge with this construction. Has his eye on this guy. It's knight a6 in this game. From here, knight c2, watching over the knight jump to b4, queen c7, knight d4, bishop f7, and d3. So we have a square, new square for the queen. d2 is available. Knight e5. And from here, it's knight f3. Black's reaction to this challenge of the e5 knight ends up withdrawing it. Knight d7 played. That marks move. These two moves here mark move 20. Ding has 27 minutes remaining. Gukesh, 52 minutes remaining. Why retreat the knight like this? I guess in a way, there's some focus on c5, and maybe black is not doesn't want to see this bishop's eyes open up. The knight on f3, after all, is interfering with its view. Now, he ducks the knight exchange here. We continue getting a pair of rooks off, and now rook to b1. I should also point out, rather than the knight retreat, there's some possible imbalance that can occur if black played bishop g6, and then even knight to b4. Here's where there could be some accident. This capture on d3, going for a 2 minor pieces versus a rook and 2 pawns. Very difficult to assess this resulting imbalance. Not a way forward in this game. Gukesh does not play with bishop to g6 here. It is the retreat. Rooks are off. And now rook b1 played here. Now, queen d2 is a very sensible move. Watching over b4, keeping an eye on a5. Just a very healthy, a nice consistent follow-up after the d3 move. Healthy square. This, as it turns out, is a big mistake by white. Why? Well, it's revealed soon enough. Gukesh finds the top move. He goes with b5. Now, this seems natural on the surface. This is not an open file, so let's get to a half-open file. Put pressure on a pawn, restrict the queen. Well, black has a tactic. There's something that Ding overlooked here. Black can actually play this top move, b5. And next up, we're looking at potentially b4. Black working with a 2-1 majority on the queen side. Difficult position ahead now for white. Huge moment in the game. Continuation here is with the capture on b5. What's the big idea? It's not to take this pawn, at least not right away. If you take on b5, rook is recapturing. Black can first insert queen b6 check. This makes all the difference. After king f1, now we're recapturing. Black now works with a 2-1 majority on the queen side. Has a direct shot at that a2 pawn now that there isn't a white c pawn around. Difficult position now for white. In the game, bishop b2 is played, and then bishop captures a2. That marks move 25. Ding, 15 minutes remaining to make his last 15 moves. Gukesh, 19 minutes. What other try might there be? If you try to defend with the queen, after b4, even though this is not yet a threat, eventually it will be. The queen will move off of the b file. And then, when this is a genuine threat, where's it going to go? You go here, yeah, the pawn is going to be won. You go here, what is this rook supposed to do? In short, it is very difficult for white to maintain coordination while also hanging on to the material. Ding's approach is to simply give up the pawn and at least activate the pieces. We do have an opened center. White is working with the bishop pair. Let's see what the try is. Bishop d4 now as a follow-up. And what do you do here as black? This is an important moment in the game. The decision here is knight A to c5. Best in the computer's eyes is knight D to c5. We'll see why moving that knight is preferable soon enough. But first, let's consider not going into some pin. Like, why aren't we, why doesn't black in this position simply move the queen to b7 or b8? Well, let's consider each. Let's go to b8 and see how white can continue. Rook a1. This is the follow-up. There's a problem here, and when the bishop moves, you get that pawn right back. If you try to hang on to the bishop, that's not going to work out. Chop, chop, and a check. You end up winning the two minor pieces for the rook. So, this queen really needs to just stick around here, watching over the a5 pawn, combating this rook a1 move. I want to highlight quickly one sneaky tactic here. If the queen somehow decided on the b7 square, you're really just asking for trouble. This is a bad move that I'm putting on next, but bishop d5 here, there's a cool win here for white. Fancy cross pin of the light square bishop. Take my queen, I take yours, knight's under fire, bishop sit a couple times, winning for white. Anyhow, a fancy queen b3 move I stumbled upon. In this game, the reaction to bishop d4 is to go into a self-pin. Now, why is it that this other knight is the winning move, in fact? Well, let's have a look. If white tries to increase the pressure on this knight, there is this threat in this position, I should note, to take on c5 and then follow up with a double attack on these 2 points. Best move in this position for black would be to get the bishop out of danger. And if white continues to put pressure on this pinned knight, black can defend. And notice in this position, after a move like bishop h3, targeting the rook, black would say, no problem, I'll just step up, and you cannot influence this pin further. This guy, in particular, will not influence the pin. Black will have time to now continue marching with the passed pawns. How are things different with the other knight move to c5? Well, let's revisit these same moves. Let's say the bishop goes here, white increases the pressure on the c5 knight. Bishop h3 here, the bishop will have an influence on this pin here. There's a knight and rook in the line of fire. All right, in this game, what do we have? After rook to c1, bishop b3 is played. Best move now for Ding Liren. He finds it. Only move, queen e1. What's the idea? Well, keep pressure on this pawn, and you also have your eye on, after bishop e6, the f2 square. Still working on this pin. Some support now needed. Rook c8 played here. Bishop e3 and rook c7 in this position. Mark, move 30. Ding has 13 minutes remaining. Gukesh 19. Still 10 more moves to go to meet time control. The threat here, this rook is unprotected. This knight is in 2 pins, and right around the corner there is d4. Knight moves, rook takes rook. The rook goes to a secure square. And the follow-up here is knight to d4. Best in the computer's eyes, really cool move, is knight to e1. Why knight e1? A couple notes. One, Bishop watches over e4, so now white is ready to play d4. There won't be knight e4 in response. The other detail is that if, let's say, black continues pushing one of the passed pawns, let's go with the b pawn, since the queen is supporting its every advance, there's d4 here and d5. And notice, because the knight is on e1, there is no time for black to play rook takes rook because it's not hitting with check. In this final position, the queen and the bishop are under fire. White will soon win material. Knight e1 was not played. Knight d4 here, still trying to work on the pin. The plan here, an interference tactic on c6. Bishop f7 is played in this game. If b4 is played here, knight takes bishop is in fact not the winning continuation for white. If you capture the bishop here, the knight can actually recapture. What's going on here? Well, you take the queen, there'd be rook takes rook, and you have to block. You have to give. You would have to give the queen right back, and black is, of course, winning up the piece, 2 monster pawns. What would the winning continuation be in this position here if b4 was played rather than the move played in the game, bishop f7? The idea here would be to influence this rook, try and maybe kick it to an unprotected square. If black tries to block with the knight, there's a problem. You could take the knight. You could take the bishop. Just taking the bishop straight away is cool enough. Black is lacking support over this c5 knight. What other option? Let's say rook c8. You could once more take the bishop. Yet again, there's an issue. You can't move with the knight. The rook is going to fall. Queen takes here. There's d4 to follow up. Problem on c8. Anything else to note? Let's say the rook gets off of the c file here. You could yet again take this guy here. Queen takes knight. There's rook takes knight. You get the 2 minor pieces for the rook. And if knight takes knight, we have this follow-up skewer idea. All right, those are some fancy lines here that look to exploit the pin going on here and here. In this game, the bishop gets out of the line of fire. Follow-up now. Interference tactic. Still working on this pin. Chop, chop, chop. Another chop. We're done chopping here. We don't want to simplify here as black too much. In the game, h6 is played, flight square for the king. If you chop too much, this position here is considered winning for white. What are you supposed to do? This rook is ready to get behind the pawns. White has a passed pawn to work with. You can't simplify too much here as black. So the queens remain on in this game after bishop captures c5. h6 is played. King goes to e1. Follow up. Black marches with a pawn. b4 on board. These last 2 moves mark move 35, Ding 12 minutes remaining. Gukesh 8 minutes. We continue. Queen d4. Knight e5. Why not centralize? Nearby, there's maybe queen d6 offering a queen exchange. Maybe winning the knight. Let's improve that knight. From here, king d2. Queen g2. Setting up a fork. There's a pinned pawn. That's defended with queen f2. Queen d5. Queen d4. Queen g2. Queen f2. See where this is going? Queen d5 here once more. These last 2 moves mark move 40. They met time control at this stage. Ding had 7 minutes remaining for banking the 30 minutes bonus time. 30-second increment kicking in at this move 40. Gukesh had 1 minute remaining when he met time control. Queen d4 played here. Now, if this queen goes to g2, we would officially have a threefold repetition. But this game continues. This is not the first time Gukesh is saying, let's play a little bit more. Maybe, good match strategy, try and make the games as long as possible, try and wear down his older opponent. Play ball, queen a2, check. The evaluation right around here, it's considered 0.5. Is he pressing too much? We continue with rook c2, queen e6, queen d8 check, picks off the a pawn. B pawn runs. Not going to be easy to reel that pawn in. Well supported with the bishop. Black has good coordination. Still a dangerous passed pawn here. Rook c1, queen d5, queen b4. Once more, possible. Knight check right around the corner. Ding says, let's get this pesky queen off. Can you win this ending? The answer, no. There is a forceful way forward here for Black. He has calculated this. After rook to b1, there is bishop a2. Rook takes b2, and now we can land a fork. And what is right around the corner here after rook takes knight, an opposite color bishop ending. But this one goes no further. We do not even see king takes knight at this stage. The players agreed to a draw at this moment here. There's nothing to play for. If we enter this environment, white is up a pawn, but it's a half-dead pawn. No winning chances here with the opposite color bishop position. So a peaceful game 8, and really one of the more interesting games of this match, to be sure. What are your thoughts on this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.